constitute your ELAC, the parents of English learners have to vote for the other parents of English learners to be part of the ELAC. Okay? So we're going to pretend for a moment that in this room, all of us are parents of English learners. And the 3 people over here, you are not parents of English learners. Okay? You might be a staff member, you might be a parent of an RFEP student, and you might just be a very interested parent of an English-only student. But you are an English learner, and you want to help out at your school's ELAC. But they're not parents of English learners. We're parents of English learners. We're now going to constitute our ELAC. So we have to vote for each other to be on a committee. So right now, I'm not talking about president, vice president, DLAC rep. To constitute our ELAC, we actually have to vote that we're all members of the ELAC. And there's a lot of ways you can do that. You can say at your very first meeting, who would like to, you do the sign-in, and you say, from this sign-in, you should have a way of knowing who are parents of English learners. So you might want some backup right there, and then someone's looking up, You want to put them to put their students' names, so at least you can go check somewhere, are these parents of English learners? And then the person facilitating the meeting could say, all those in favor of this being our ELAC, say aye. Can they vote? No, they're not parents of English learners. But here's a fun one. What if they wanted to be part of our ELAC? Can they be?
If it fits in our bylaws?
If it's in your bylaws. But can they vote for themselves to be on the ELAC? No, you see, only we can vote who's on the ELAC because we're the parents of the English learners. So that's what this means. The parents or guardians of English learner students choose other parents as members of the ELAC committee. See, that's why we can vote for them, but they don't get to vote for us or themselves. This is not a practice that has been held in Sweetwater to the degree that we need it to be held to. But you see how it's not that complicated at all. And then in your minutes, what would you say? The parents of English learners voted, and the following parents are now members of the ELAC. You could do this again in December if more parents came. You could do this at every meeting if you wanted to. If there's parents that show up and they weren't part of the ELAC before, I do say go back to your bylaws of how membership is constituted. And you want to keep your bylaws as simple as possible. So you might decide that when you begin to see that you don't have a critical mass of parents showing up, that you do another big drive of membership and you vote people in. Typically, your ELAC isn't really voting for anything. They're giving advisory. So quorum doesn't really matter that much unless you made it matter in your bylaws. And that would be the only time where I would be real careful about who did you say was a member or not a member, because you might find yourself without quorum if you made if you made that a big emphasis. Does that make sense? Just like looking at how parent groups function. Did you have a question?
Yes, so if I do the voting inside my ELAC meeting, my first ELAC meeting, am I in compliance if only the parents that showed up voted?
Yes.
Okay, that was just like
That's fine.
Thank you.
Absolutely. You can later, so the question was, if the parents that showed up at the first meeting, if those are the parents that voted, are you in compliance? Yes, that would put you in compliance, absolutely.
But not for that to be an ELAC, for those members to be ELAC.
For those members to be members of the ELAC.
But when you have the representatives.
So we'll talk about that in a minute.
Okay.
Excuse me. Yes.
So it mentions the 15% of the ELs. So if in that first
No.
meeting-
15% is nothing. That was that 15%. That was the previous slide.
Okay.
And we meet that compliance at the district level.
Okay.
Yes. Sorry, some water. Okay. So we take that vote. Now we have an ELAC. We voted for each other. We're an ELAC. We voted for all three of them. They are now members of the ELAC because we voted for them. Are they a parent of an English learner? No, but we voted for them anyway. Now we get on to, let me back up one more step here. What if we are the only 6 parents of English learners on the ELAC, but there's 20 non-parents of English learners on the ELAC? Now we have a problem. The parents of English learners constitute at least the same percentage of the committee membership as their children of the student body. So if at our school, 50% of our kids are English learners, at least 50% of the ELAC must be parents of English learners. We usually don't have a problem with that in this district because we don't have a lot of parents of non-English learners trying to join an ELAC. But this was the way of the law trying to protect that an ELAC would become about something else and not about the needs of English learners. So this is like a protection clause around the percentage. Now, if only 20% of our kids are English learners, then only 20% of the parents have to be parents of English learners, unless your bylaws say otherwise. This one we do not have a problem with at all in Sweetwater. Again, because most of the parents attending ELAC are parents of English learners. The only position that must be voted on by an ELAC is their DLAC rep. There's no requirement for bylaws. There's no requirement for a president, a vice president, a parliamentarian. None of that is part of the Ed Code requirement in an ELAC. It's a good practice to have bylaws. It's a good practice to have a few people that are going to take a leadership role. And it's always a good practice in education to train up parent leadership. So for that reason, you know, you may want to still have those positions, but we wouldn't say we had to stop all our ELAC meetings because our president never shows up. I would say that doesn't matter. You still have to be having your ELAC meetings. There's no requirement that you have a president. The only requirement is that at least one representative of the ELAC attends the DLAC. Our current DLAC bylaws say that the schools must send a representative, an alternate, and something called a community member, which I still am confused about, but that's a separate topic that I will address at another time. So the only elected position is the DLAC representative. It cannot be appointed. So if I'm the principal of our school, I can't come over to parent Jajit and say, you're going to be the DLAC rep, okay? And Jajit's going to say, okay. And then all of you are like, well, wait a minute. You all have to vote for Jajit to be the DLAC representative. And you need a ballot and a system of voting. So one of your handouts, we have a little sample ballot. And it's actually for president, but it could be DLAC rep. And this is the only thing state and federal needs. We do not need to see how you elected your president, your vice president. All we need to see is how did you elect your representative to the DLAC. However your bylaws tell you to do that. So, can people vote by email? If your bylaws say so. Can people drop off their voting ballots the day after the meeting? If your bylaws say so.